The block is warm in the way only July in Chicago can manage. Thick air, the smell of lighter fluid, the sound of someone's radio bleeding through a screen door 2 houses down. Christmas lights are strung between 2 oak trees, even though it's the middle of summer, and the effect is stranger than it should be. Festive and slightly wrong, like a smile held just a beat too long. You weren't invited to this party. A neighbor dragged you along, said it'd be good for you to get out, and you came because you had nowhere else to be, and the couch you've been sleeping on has a spring that finds your spine every night around 3 a.m. So you stand at the edge of it all with a paper plate and a can of something cold, watching. The man at the center of it is working a grill the size of a small boat. He's wearing a paper crown, tilted rakishly, doing the voice of some cartoon character you half recognize for a little girl in pigtails who screams with delight and runs to hide behind her mother's legs. The adults around him are laughing. His name, your neighbor tells you, is John. John Wayne Gacy. Contractor. Runs his own crew, PDM contractors. Good work, fair rates. He's a Democratic precinct captain. He organized this whole block last election cycle, knocked on every door himself. He once shook Rosalind Carter's hand. There's a photograph of it, framed, someone says, in his living room. He spots you before you're ready to be spotted. Walks over with a JC's pin on his collar and a plate of food you didn't ask for, extends his hand, and says, "You look like someone who knows how to work." It's a compliment. It lands like one. You tell him your name. 6 minutes later, across the yard, he uses it again, introducing you to someone else, and the accuracy of it feels like a minor miracle. 3 days later, your dishwashing shift gets cut to 2 nights a week. The coffee can on the shelf has $47 in it. The deposit on the room you've been saving for requires $200, minimum. You do the math on the back of a receipt, and the math is not kind. He calls that same afternoon. Your neighbor gave him your number, he says. Hope that's all right. He needs a reliable young guy, construction work, remodeling, day rates paid in cash at the end of every shift. He names a figure. It is more than you make in a week with a plate full of dishes and wet shoes. You say yes before he finishes the sentence. 8213. West Summerdale Avenue is a ranch house, cream or yellow depending on the light, and utterly unremarkable from the street. He meets you at the door, gives you the tour of the work site in progress, unrolls plans on a kitchen table covered in invoices and pencil marks. He is organized. The renovation is legitimate. Physical work, lumber and shovels, and drywall compound that dries under your fingernails. At 5 p.m., he counts out your cash in front of you, bill by bill, exactly what he promised. The house has a crawl space beneath it. The hatch is in the hallway floor, a square of wood with a recessed handle, and you walk over it 3-4 times a day without thinking about it. There's a smell in the house you can't quite place, underneath the drywall dust, and the lunch he always cooks, always generous, always more than you can finish. It's something wet and close, like the walls have a temperature of their own. You don't name it. You're tired. It's hot. The work is real, and the money is real, and that's what you're here for. Over 2 weeks, he builds something that feels, in retrospect, like a room with no visible doors. He asks about your family over lunch. He gives you advice about landlords, about money, about how the city works if you know the right people. He lends you a tool belt. He introduces you to his neighbor using your full name and says this kid is going to do great things, and the neighbor nods like he has no reason to doubt it. He takes you to one JC's meeting just to show you around, says networking is currency, and he's generous with both. There is an afternoon, a hot Wednesday, where he pours 2 glasses of something amber and hands you one before you can think to decline. You feel wrong afterward, slightly behind yourself, the way the world goes soft at the edges when your blood sugar drops. You tell yourself it's the heat. You tell yourself you've been pushing hard this week. You drink a glass of water and keep working. You do not tell yourself the truth, because telling yourself the truth would require you to distrust the most respected, most connected, most publicly vouched for man you have ever met in your life. And that feels like a you problem. That feels like anxiety. That feels like ingratitude. He asks you to stay late on a Friday to finish measurements on the lower section. The other guys have cleared out. It's just the two of you in the kitchen, the light above the sink humming its single flat note. He asks if you've ever seen a handcuff trick. He does it at children's parties, he says. He's Pogo the Clown on weekends, did you know that? He holds up a pair of cuffs the way a magician holds a deck of cards, loose and casual, proof that the object is ordinary. He demonstrates on himself, clicks one wrist, then the other, then releases them in under a second. The trick, he says, is that the cuffs always have a key. He looks at you with a grin that has worked on everyone in a 20-foot radius for his entire adult life. You laugh. You hold out your hands. The click is quiet. The key goes into his pocket, not yours. The room doesn't change. The invoices are still on the table. The tool belt he lent you is still on the counter. The kitchen light still hums. But the warmth is gone. Not dramatically. Not all at once. It drains the way heat drains from a room when someone opens a window in winter, and you feel the absence before you can name the cause. His voice changes, not into anything theatrical, not into something from a film, but into something flat and procedural, the voice of a man who has completed this transition before and finds it unremarkable. He explains what is going to happen. He uses the word control the way a foreman uses the word schedule. The smell from the crawl space is identifiable now. You know it now. You understand the hatch in the hallway floor and the recessed handle and the heavy contractor's plastic sheeting stacked in the garage next to the lumber. You understand the names he mentioned without explanation. Robert, John, Michael, the young guys who cycled through and moved on to other work. You understand that they did not move on to other work. You negotiate. Of course you negotiate, because that's what you do when a situation seems impossible, and you're still human enough to believe that words can reach the thing sitting across from you. You tell him about your family. You tell him about the room, the deposit, the $47 in the coffee can. You say you won't tell anyone, you just want to leave, you just want to go home. The sentences are true. They're also nothing. He listens to them the way he'd listen to a radio he isn't really hearing, waiting for the song to end. Night passes. Somewhere between midnight and the first gray suggestion of dawn, you stop talking. You sit with the cuffs and the quiet and the weight of a room that has been the last room for other people just like you. People who were offered a reasonable thing by a well-liked man and said yes without knowing they were signing something. Pink light comes through the window above the sink. Ordinary, early, summer pink. Somewhere on the block, a sprinkler kicks on, the mechanical shush of it against the grass. $20 of municipal water on a Tuesday morning. A dog barks twice. A car starts and pulls away slowly. Someone heading to a shift somewhere. A cup of coffee in their hand, the radio on. The whole neighborhood is waking up to its Tuesday 40 feet from where you are. You scream until you can't. The walls of the room, the walls of a contractor's home, absorb exactly as much sound as they need to. No one comes. The sprinkler runs its cycle and shuts off. In the end, there is no cinematic reversal. There is no hidden reserve you find at the last moment. No line you deliver that reframes what is happening. No mistake he makes because you are clever or brave or sufficiently determined. He is larger than you and unhurried, and he has done this before. The confrontation is entirely interior. It happens only in the space between your ears, and what it consists of is this. You, in the last minutes you have, deciding where to put your attention. You think about your family. You think about the coffee can. You think about the deposit and the room and the key that would have been yours and no one else's. You think, strangely, about the block party, the Christmas lights strung between the oaks in the middle of July, how you stood at the edge of it and felt, for a moment, like you might be somewhere you could belong. The lights were wrong and they were warm, and you chose the warmth. He opens the hatch. The smell rises, full and final, and you understand now that it was always this. It was always the people who came before you in exactly the position you are in now, and the word that comes is not fear exactly, but recognition. The recognition that the mechanism that brought you here is the same mechanism that brings anyone, anywhere. You trusted the signal. You trusted the consensus. You trusted 30 neighbors and a photograph with the First Lady, and a Jaycee's pin, and a paper crown, and a man who learned your name and used it back to you warmly. You trusted what everyone around you confirmed. The hatch closes. Above it, the kitchen is still. The invoices are on the table. The tool belt is on the counter. He has a Jaycee's event on Saturday. When investigators open that hatch in December of 1978, they find evidence of 26 victims in the crawl space. 7 more are recovered from the Des Plaines River. Of the 33, several are never fully identified. They remain in records as John Doe. Families who reported young men missing and were told to wait, told they probably just moved on, are still waiting for a name to come home. He was not hidden. He threw the parties. He worked the grill. He learned your name. If you want to see more, click the video on screen now.